Hey, how you doing? Hope you're well. I just did my favorite trick of I recorded the first 2 minutes without actually recording anything. Been umming and ahhing for quite some time about whether to make a video about this. I've got no intention of making a series. The amazing Dr. John Campbell is doing such a great job of informing people with real, genuine information every day. We've been watching his videos most days. Also, I'll link below to Dr. John Campbell's latest video. I'm going to also provide a link to a YouTuber who did a really great video about exponential growth and logistic curves and how they work and why they work the way they do, and that's fascinating as well. I'll supply you with some good links below. And also, this is Worldometer. So I'll go straight to, like, for example, there are these. So this is total cases globally, which is approaching 150k. And if you look at it on a logarithmic scale, it was starting to bend downwards quite nicely. And now it's turned the other way because of particularly I think because of the outbreak in Europe. Again, logarithmic, and it started to bend up again. On their page is a table that's that's updated regularly, and I've got some numbers from that table. I wanted to talk a little bit about why make a video about this. I feel I've been following it really closely. I've been following Dr. John Campbell, and I've been listening to the radio when I'm on my way to students, and over the last couple of weeks, I've heard a lot of denial and a lot of, I feel like they're really underplaying this. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, it's the opposite. You know, the media are blowing this up and trying to make this into something, bigger than it is. But for example, last weekend, so it was virtually almost exactly a week ago today, we were in the car listening to Any Questions, which is like Radio 4's Question Time, and somebody asked the question, is it safe for us to all be in this room? And there was a professor there who you'd trust to give you an honest opinion, and he said, well, as far as we understand it at the moment, it isn't passing around the UK population. And so it's perfectly safe to be here. And kind of that was the end of that. And we were kind of shouting at the radio because it's pretty obvious. I think it was obvious then, and it's far, far more obvious now that, of course, it is freely passing through the UK population. And things like that have just been quite infuriating. There have been so many examples, and I won't go into all the details of that because I can just leave Radio 4 to talk nonsense about it, and we can have a sensible, grown-up conversation. But my general thoughts on this, we have, and I remember reading this. So I first became aware of this around the 10th of January when it first became, when the Chinese first started to come out officially about this, and I've been following it really closely ever since. And one of the things that came out quite early was something that said that, because they could look at this virus and they could see that it first came into existence somewhere between the 1st of October and the 31st of October. And people had almost forgotten that and were thinking that this was something that only really existed in January 2020. And this has been bothering me for a while because although obviously the number of cases in November and December was probably relatively low, you did have global travel. People were flying, particularly from the epicenter in Wuhan, out to lots of different countries. And it's become very clear now that you can be showing no symptoms but you can be spreading the virus. So for me, there's been a massive disconnect between kind of where we are logically, or where we should be logically with everything we know, and where we thought we were, and it's been bothering me. The other thing is, I noticed there was a headline yesterday where they said that the first recorded case was actually the 17th of November, which is very consistent with it coming into existence in October. And as you can see here, I've been trying to get some decent numbers on incubation. So minimum of 2, maximum of 14. So that's the currently kind of understood range. I expect that's a 95% confidence interval. So the bottom end 2, the average 8, the maximum 14. Then from first showing symptoms until death, we have this 14 days. So I would add them together. So from somebody first catching the virus to dying could be in this range here, all the way from 16 up to 28 days. So that's one of the pieces that I want to kind of show you. Over on the left here, we've got the total number of cases by country. And for example, I think it's worth looking at. I haven't heard anybody else point this out, but I think it's kind of an interesting guide. The Diamond Princess, the 696 cases, I don't think we can guarantee that's all the cases, but it's probably one of the most comprehensive case measures that we have. So it almost makes for almost a controlled environment, isn't it? And you have a case fatality rate of 1%, exactly. Well, it says exactly 1% here. It's one decimal place. The other example that's similar to that is South Korea, where I recently heard that they were testing something like 10,000 people a day. And so they've probably got a pretty reasonable handle on how many cases they've got. And again, very similar number, a CFR this time of 0.9%. So I don't know if anybody else. So the UK's already bust through 1%, which means that we're undercounted. In all likelihood, we're undercounting the number of cases. Of course, Dr. John Campbell in his daily videos has often pointed out, that you don't know whether there's been a change to the virus, so that in a particular country the CFR is actually higher. But for the purpose of this, we can use 1% as an assumption. Australia is interesting, isn't it? Because it's summer in Australia, and I guess it's fairly hot, but they've still got cases, which is worrying, considering that it would be nice to believe that once we get to spring and summer in the UK, it might help us. But look, here's Australia. Anything else? Any other 1%? Switzerland have got 0.9%. But really, Diamond Princess and South Korea are the only ones that I know much about. I suppose it's interesting that what appears to have happened in Italy is that they kind of grossly underestimated what was actually happening. And I guess, if I'm honest, my fear is that the same thing could be happening in the UK. And the official number that I've heard, to be fair, a couple of days ago was 5,000 to 10,000 cases. And I just can't help picturing behind closed doors that conversations are going on and models are being made that are probably a lot more frightening than that. And when it comes to announcing a number to the public, that they're probably lowballing it. Like I said, it does bother me that, if you run exponential growth on one person coming from Wuhan to the UK in December, or say 3 to 5 people, with the virus coming from Wuhan to the UK in January, and not being spotted, or the fact that it's probably an awful lot more than that came over here in December, January, February, and somebody measured their temperature and the temperature wasn't high, so they just came to the UK, they passed it on to somebody, and I've done a lot of modeling around that, but today I'm not going to look at that. I just want to do something. Now that we're starting to get numbers through on deaths, and this 21 is bound to be an underestimate. I'm pretty sure that you would expect that there have been cases that have been categorized as flu or just simply as pneumonia over the last 2 months that were in fact this. So this is probably an underestimate, but we'll use it for this calculation. So this figure, the 21 at a 1% CFR, would give you 2,100 cases. Now that would be quite reassuring if that told us that we had 2,100 cases now. But remember these numbers here. It takes 16 to 28 days from actually catching the virus to becoming one of these 21. So I'm using here, if you go to the maths video that I've linked below, you'll see I think he uses numbers in the range 1.15 to 1.25. So this would be how much you multiply the current cases by each day to get the number of cases the next day. And so using just a really simple, times it by that number to the power of 16 days or 22 days or 28 days, you can work backwards. So if you've got 21 deaths now, and that means you had 2,100 cases 16 days ago, that means you'd have 19,651 cases now. 22 days, if this number represents where we were 22 days ago, then you'd have 45,454 cases. And if it's 28 days, then you'd have 105,138. The other thing that I wanted to say that I think I haven't heard this mentioned or considered enough is, and again this comes from Dr. John Campbell, link below, they're testing for the virus. They're not testing for whether you've got immunity to the virus, i.e. have had it. So if, as you would hope, there are a lot of people who are just getting a very mild illness, or it's supposed to be 1 in 5 who get virtually no symptoms at all. If those people are getting the virus, recovering from the virus, essentially removing the virus from their system, then if you test those people, then they're going to test negative. I suppose that has some more of a bearing on the 1%, doesn't it? Because I was thinking, because the chances are that actually where you have 1% here, 1% for Diamond Princess and 0.9% for South Korea, that there are going to be, even on the Diamond Princess, there are probably some cases that slip through the net. So yeah, I think finally I'll just we'll just look at the total. So actually it's hit 150,000, and this headline case fatality rate is 3.7%. But I think it's misleading to treat that as the actual number. But I guess, yeah, the final point, the thing that's bothering me the most is in the UK so far there's been a lot of hot air, but I can't name anything concrete which has been done at all. And we've watched China go through effectively a tsunami of cases. Then we've seen the same thing wash over Italy. And now we're seeing something similar happen in Spain. And it's kind of like we're all lining up for the runway here. We're all, The UK, I mean, look at the UK have got 1,140 known cases. The USA have 2,340. Like I say, everything, I've heard a lot of hot air on the radio, but if I go outside, we're all carrying on as normal, and we're all spreading this virus as quickly as we can, to be honest. Yes, we're all washing our hands, but really, we don't know if that's doing, everybody says it helps. I'm washing my hands 50 times a day right now. The problem is that the case fatality rate should be 1%. But if 10, 12, 15% of people who get this virus are becoming seriously ill, and you run out of hospital beds because there are so many people because there are so many of them, and you don't treat that critical 5% that are extremely ill, then you get a case fatality rate of 5%. And I cannot for the life of me understand why anybody would want to consciously go into that situation. And why wouldn't you want to do everything that you can right now to stop this from becoming a crisis? Yes, I understand that in the longer term, the ideal situation would be for us to have herd mentality. I get that. I was supposed to say herd immunity there, but I said herd mentality. But why wouldn't you want to stop it from becoming a crisis? I don't see why we would set ourselves on a course that would produce unnecessary deaths. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, this is definitely not part of a series. I've got other videos that I want to edit and get up on YouTube, but this has been on my mind, and it's been on my mind for 2 months, and for the last few days it's been hard to think about anything else, so I just had to record this video. I recognise it's not perfect. Even after editing, I know it's going to be really long, lots of waffle. I do apologise, and absolutely no reassurance to be found in this video at all, I don't think. But I know that there are a lot of differing views on this, and there's an awful lot of people who are saying, it's just flu, don't worry about it. The majority of us need to get ill to get herd mentality to protect the vulnerable. But, oh my God, I did it twice. I'm glad I took the time to edit this. I meant herd immunity. That seems so contradictory to me, because in the process of us all getting this virus, we're going to give it to the vulnerable, and it's just annoying me. I'm sorry, it's annoying me. Anyway, I've tried not to waffle too much on this video and to just share links to useful places and some numbers, but obviously I've done my own back calculations and they're not very reassuring. But isn't it better for us to be worried about this and to respond to the worst case scenario before it happens? I think it is. So there you go. That's me done. Thanks a lot.